Can you tell us more about it then? How did the Forced Marriage Unit get going, and what was it that really caused it to be created?
We've been around in one guise or another since 2000 as the result of a parliamentary inquiry into the subject, but back then it was based solely in the Foreign Office and focused entirely on helping British nationals when they were overseas. In 2005 it became Forced Marriage Unit, and that was really a step change in what we did then. So it's a joint initiative of the Foreign Office and the Home Office, and that means that we can help British nationals overseas, but anybody who's in the UK. And so it's since 2005 we've really kind of stepped up that work. The legislation that came in, the Forced Marriage Act in 2007, put us on a whole new footing, really giving us a lot more scope in the work we could do to tackle the problem.
Orlando, in terms of filming something like that, you know, it's dangerous, it's frightening. How did you actually go about it? Obviously you don't want to be putting a great big camera in people's faces. How did you actually film it? What kind of crew did you have, and you know, what kind of camera were you going around with?
Well, I guess, I mean, I don't think it's not really dangerous for us as a film crew. I think that the dangerous work, really, I mean, is what the Foreign Office guys do, and we were just there shadowing their work. I mean, you always, you know, I suppose you always want to work with the smallest crew possible when you're doing kind of sensitive work. I think for us, because I'm a guy, and Patrick, who I did most of the filming with up there, we were told at the beginning that there was no way two guys could go and make this film. And actually, it wasn't the case at all, because most of the women that we met were very open with us, and maybe it was because we were so sort of far removed from their own lives that they felt they could actually speak to us.
So was it just the two of you?
Pretty much, it was just the two of us, and
you and your camera, presumably.
Basically, yes.
And what were you using something quite small? Or
no, we used the camera just
this sort of
just
size,
like that.
yeah.
It's less. I think it's less about the camera size. It's just more about how you approach people and try and be, I suppose, warm and friendly with everyone. And I think then you often break down the boundaries that, you know, that stop people being scared of a big camera being in their face.
How long did it take you to build all of your contributors?
Well, I think the longest process was actually trying to convince the Forced Marriage Unit to let us film with them, actually. So once that happened, I mean, we were doing this film that I suppose for about 9 months, but a lot of it revolved around waiting for sort of forced marriage cases to crop up, because I mean, yeah, the film sort of follows those cases, and there's only certain cases you can follow, because certain ones are too sensitive, or the girl involved is too young, or they don't want to be filmed, and so we sort of had to wait for cases to crop up.
How many cases do you get a year where you actually literally have to go in and rescue?
We get over 400 cases where we're actively involved in providing assistance. Over 250 of those were assistance cases, generally overseas. In any given year we get between 1,600 and 1,700 calls to the unit in London. That could be from victims, friends, family, partners, or it could be referred from the police or social services, for example. And some of those could just be fairly quick instance giving advice on what people's options are. They could last that could last for months. And lots of phone calls, but it doesn't actually develop into a case where we have to provide assistance overseas. So, but again, we think that's the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, we don't for a moment think that's the full extent of the problem.
And does it get violent sometimes?
Cases can get violent. I mean, every case is different. It's a bit of a cliche, but in with this type of work, it's very true. And one of the reasons for having a dedicated unit is a lot of what we do, as Olaf was saying in the film, is kind of coordinate different services, focusing very much on the victim. Because we have a specialised team, we can understand to a large extent the situation they're in, what they're facing, and make sure they get the right response from different agencies. So it's about understanding that each case is different, that what the risk of violence is in each of them, and making sure the different support systems are there.
And understanding how to kind of diffuse it as well. I mean, one of the things I found really interesting is it 14% of the calls are from men? Is that right?
Yeah, about 14-15%.
I mean, what kind of guys are going to call in? What sort of stories are there?
Well, it's it can be quite different for men. There's a different stigma attached, I think, for men calling and saying that this is the situation they're in. Again, there are lots of different reasons around why they're in that position, but we do understand that it may be more difficult for them. A lot of this, as we saw in the film, is based on a sense of honour and a sense of shame, and for men that can be much more acute to say, I'm being forced into marriage and I need someone to help me get out of that. So
it is men calling in because they've been forced then into marriage. Is that and how do you deal with that for them? Can you actually physically rescue them in the same way?
Yes, yes we can. If it comes to that, then yes, we can carry out a rescue in the same way as we would for a female victim. I mean, what we do with any victim is talk them through the situation and their understanding that they have a right to choose in this situation, whether they're a man or a woman, and whatever kind of honour systems they're dealing with. Ultimately, they have a right to choose, or they should have a right to choose who they marry and how they live their lives, and going through with them what that means in practice and what their options are, and working with them to support them in whatever decision they make.
Did anyone want to ask anything?
Yeah, but what's the recruitment and training process of your staff? I mean, is it a lengthy process, or do you prefer people to have sort of similar backgrounds or been from similar experience, or is it completely varied?
It can be quite varied. I mean, we have an induction and training program for caseworkers, and we also work very much as a team because people have different skills and different backgrounds, and we have someone in the team who is recruited externally, so they have a background in the case of the current person, background in kind of frontline victim support and working with particularly women who are victims of domestic abuse and that kind of issue. And so we have the induction process and training process in how to handle calls, understanding what services we can provide, and how to move through those options with a caller. But then also, what's very important is working as a team, so we know what each other's strengths and weaknesses and expertise is, so we can kind of bounce off each other and make sure the victim gets the best out of the forced marriage unit.
And just a final question to you, unless anybody's got anything else.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah, go on, please.
What's the percentage of men getting prosecuted from the cases that you get? What I mean, is it the dad, the father, the friend, is it child abuse? Is it the fact they've got a bounty hunter? And I don't know.
As you indicate in the question, there's lots of different aspects, so it can be quite complex. I mean, what we're very, very clear on what we do is providing a victim-focused service. So ultimately, we are less interested in the prosecution side of things than actually protecting and helping those victims, those individuals that that come to us. There was a big consultation in 2005 about how we deal with forced marriage as a potentially criminal issue. Many of the respondents to that said that criminalisation, the downsides of criminalisation would outweigh the good sides. So that's the government took that view, and so we have the Forced Marriage Act, the legislation upon which a lot of our work is based, is a civil act. So the Forced Marriage Protection Order, which is kind of our main tool of legislation to kind of tackle the problem of forced marriage, is a civil order. So what we find is a lot of victims, as we saw in the film, they do want to escape that situation, they do want to keep their rights to choose how to live their lives, but at the same time they don't want to hurt their families. And kind of pushing them into a position where they could see their father be prosecuted is something that could put them off asking for help even more. So we tend to focus our resources on getting that individual the support they need and getting them out of that situation somewhere that's safe. There are some prosecutions. There was an imprisonment recently for a breach of a forced marriage protection order, but they vary on case to case.
So what would be the way forward then? Is it education?
A lot of it is about education, about challenging those kind of behaviours and attitudes that condone that kind of practice. So that's something that we're quite committed to doing, and we will be kind of pushing forward with that.
And that's the next step. We've the service we have in terms of helping victims is quite well developed. Of course, it's not perfect, and we're always trying to improve that. But that's a very well developed service. in terms of training and outreach to other professionals and practitioners, and so police know what they're meant to be doing and social services know what they're meant to be doing. That work is quite advanced as well. We want to try and make that more consistent and get more awareness out there. But the next big step, if you like, is that kind of community engagement and that, you know, addressing the root causes of the practice.
Off of the back of that, how many people that call up and report forced marriage are the actual victims themselves, and how many are a third party that suspects someone might be put in that situation?
I think we say the majority are victims themselves, but we do get referrals from the police, from social services, from schools. Schools are often one group that can spot early indications that there's a problem if someone's, you know, hasn't returned from holiday, or if the family are asking for extended, you know, extra time off school because they're going back to the country of origin. Occasionally from medical professionals or from, you know, from other colleagues, or from friends and family as well. But I think the majority are victims themselves contacting us.
How did they find out about your unit?
We've got quite a big kind of publicity and awareness raising programme. Again, as I was saying, the legislation was kind of the big step change for us. That put us on a statutory footing. So as a result of the legislation, there is a statutory duty for you know, all of the agencies to be doing certain bits of work to tackle forced marriage. So that gives us the basis to then go out to all of them and say, this is what you need to be doing, and, you know, this is how you can do it, and support them there. We also do outreach talks and awareness raising sessions wherever we're invited. We also can target areas where we know there are particular problems and ask to go and talk at schools, to talk at community events, that kind of thing.
I noticed in the film that Jasminda was talking with social workers, but how did those social workers know in the first place that the young woman was at risk? And how, I mean, are social services very in tune and acutely aware of this, or do you think there needs to be a lot more work done in that area? We
need to do more work to have a consistent response. It can vary because a lot of it can depend on whether an individual, it could be social worker, it could be police officer, it could be someone in the local authority. It can depend whether that individual knows much about forced marriage, whether they've you know, read and seen the statutory guidance and the, you know, the practice guidelines that we promote. And it can vary. You know, there are some authorities where they will have a number of cases. There are some where they may have very few. So the response can be a bit patchy. One of our aims is to try and, you know, raise the level across the whole geographic area and the whole kind of professional services area to have a much more consistent response.
It's interesting. The social worker that you're just referring to, we didn't include it in the film, but she, during that conversation, she actually says, listen, I've never dealt with anything like this at all. You need to talk me through everything I need to do. Because
I thought that was really interesting, the work that Jasminda's doing in talking to the community and people who are, you know, presumably, I mean, talking to teachers as well. Because if a teacher's in a classroom and can spot this, then... on that note, Jasminda was actually going to be with us this evening, and unfortunately she couldn't be because she was called to a case in Cardiff over the weekend, so she did send her apologies. It's a shame because it would have been really interesting to ask her some questions as well. Does anybody else have any questions for this forum, or would you like to continue over a glass of wine? I think I know the short answer.
I don't want to stand in the way of the wine. What I should have said at the start was just thank you to Current for commissioning this and making it happen, and to Grain for being committed and sticking with it, and, you know, badgering us until we said yes.
Thanks for the access.
Well, I mean, you're right. It's something we don't go into lightly because we want to raise awareness, but it is, you know, it can be very delicate, very sensitive, and lots of risks attached, both for us and for the people we're working with. But you know, what has come out of it is a very powerful and movie that handles the issue very sensitively. So thank you very much.
And I agree. And I think I think you know, the thing here is that Current has been very, very brave to make this film, and I'd like to say congratulations. Thank you.
And obviously, thank you from us to you guys, especially for letting us in to your offices.
Dino?
Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much.